I was had your boy Rico from RicoScores. I'm recording this at 6:40 a.m. Eastern time. So by the time this comes out, probably around like 10, 11, or 12. Maybe some things will change. Maybe some crazy rumor comes out between now and then, and everybody's potentially gonna look at me like, why didn't you talk about that? Like, that's one of the major ones. Just to warn y'all, I'm recording this 6:40 a.m. But we're here to talk about a lot of the draft rumors going around the NFL right now. This is not a Commanders video. Now, of course, anything that pertains to the Commanders, of course, I'm going to talk about Commanders, especially with some of these topics that we're going to talk about, like edge rushers. When people see potential edge rushers going, when do they see Ja'Tavion Sanders talking around league circles right now? What round do people project him to go in, and do the Commanders have a chance of getting them after potentially taking quarterback number 2 overall? Speaking of quarterback, we have a lot of quarterback rumor updates, how the Falcons feel about quarterback, how the Patriots feel about quarterback, and more. Also, I mean, just so many random updates about some people's draft stock falling, some people's draft stock getting a little bit higher and improving, some interesting results, especially from the linebacker group. A lot of those guys killed the combine, so a lot of those guys' stocks went up. We're going to talk about all of that and more, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned because, of course, I'm going to do all of my Commanders things. I'm doing 1 or 2 minimum Commanders videos a day, but I'm also trying to mix in some NFL stuff in general, especially since I love the entire draft process. I mean, I'm high school recruiting, Georgia Bulldogs, draft, Commanders, so all of that in between I love to talk about and discuss, breakdown, and everything like that. So I will have a lot of general NFL news that any fan base would be interested in, especially like draft rumors like these, potential first round mock drafts for all 32 teams, things like that. So make sure y'all stay tuned for all of that. Without further ado, let's go and get to this video. Let's get it. All right, so first of all, I want to thank everybody for the Cash App donations. My boy Black Cuz for the $5 compliment and the donation, and my boy Hollywood Salmon for the donation too, man. Really appreciate y'all. Definitely want to make sure I shouted y'all out separately in the video because I wasn't live streaming when y'all donated. Y'all sent it to the Cash App, so I had to make sure the next video I did after I saw that y'all donated, I had to shout y'all out. Really appreciate y'all, man. Big time for that. But let's go ahead and get to the first rumor. So according to Lance Zierlein, Malik Nabers is the best wide receiver in the 2024 NFL Draft. He believes there will be more teams with Nabers wide receiver 1 than the public thinks, and that MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., skipping the combine while Nabers likely runs in the 4.3s is worth keeping an eye on. Really interesting. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of people saying that even do prefer Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of those guys say that Malik Nabers is like 1B right behind him. I don't know if y'all been keeping track of like Steve Smith's breakdowns of wide receivers. He said the same thing, but even before he said it in a YouTube video that I literally just watched like yesterday, I was seeing reports coming out that people were saying that Malik Nabers may arguably be the best wide receiver in this class, or at the very least he's 1B. Like, there's not a big gap between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers, and that's why, like I've said, and we're going to talk about this later in the video, but probably the biggest gap from number 1 guy at their position to number 2 is tight end with Brock Bowers, and then the second guy potentially maybe being a Ja'Tavion Sanders. No other position group has that wide of a gap from the number 1 guy to the number 2, and that includes wide receiver, because again, some people even prefer Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. Next up, Caleb Williams. There's a report again saying that a lot of people feel like Caleb Williams' dad will be a problem as part of this draft process. First of all, Caleb Williams just recently came out and said he's not providing any medicals to NFL teams unless he's like is interested in you and is gonna send you the medicals himself. Basically, he like cut off the chance for anybody to get his medicals, so there won't be all 32 teams with access to his like actual medicals and things like that, which is really interesting. He's gonna only send them to the teams that he wants to have them, so that's already a little weird and complicated. I mean, the fact that him, Jayden Daniels, Drake May not participating in the combine throwing or anything like that, that makes sense. Like that was understandable. You could only potentially lose more stock than you could ever gain. I mean, Caleb Williams looks like a certified #1 overall pick. Doing anything at the combine would only hurt his chances. But the not allowing teams access to your medicals is really interesting. And then a lot of people are saying that his dad is once again asking for ownership stake in an NFL team once his son is drafted. That seems to be a report that's come back more than once. I don't know if that's true or not. Again, that's why we're calling these rumors and not necessarily reports. Now to move on, there's also some interesting edge rusher news as well, because this is from Walter Football. Team sources view only 3 players as definitive first-round edge rushers. Alabama's Dallas Turner, and I think he's going to absolutely kill the draft. Even as a Georgia Bulldog fan, it's amazing to me that Dallas Turner isn't receiving, at the very least, close to the same height that Will Anderson was getting. I feel like it shouldn't be as big of a gap as it's been so far this offseason between those two. I'm not necessarily saying that Dallas Turner is going to be better than Will Anderson, but I think the gap is a little bit closer than a lot of people think. Also, UCLA's Latu and Florida State's Jared Verse. Given there are a lot of teams that need pass rushing help, and it can be difficult to fill that void in free agency, most guys are probably going to end up getting tagged. Brian Burns, Josh Allen, Huff over there, Bryce Huff for the Jets. You never know if my boy Jonathan Grenard gets tagged from the Texans as well. It's not looking too good out there for the free agency market as far as edge rusher goes, so I agree. So sources from some franchises picking late in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft say their organizations will probably consider moving up for a pass rusher if one slides to the right range. Sources from a couple of playoff teams said their franchises would be aggressive to potentially move up if Turner were to slide beyond the top 10. So if for some reason Dallas Turner makes it out of the top 10, look for potentially one of those playoff teams way later in the first round to do whatever it takes to trade up to get him. And boy, could you imagine a team that's already that elite, say like the Ravens, trade up to get him? How scary that would be. Oh my Lord. Also, this is not necessarily like a rumor, but I thought it was really interesting that Missouri defensive lineman, edge rusher, whatever you want to call him, maybe you prefer to call him defensive tackle after this information, but you know the RAS scores, shouts out to the Kent Lee Plate, however you pronounce his last name, shouts out to him because he always does the RAS scores. I love him. And Darius Robinson as a defensive tackle had a 9.64 athleticism score, but as an edge rusher, he had a 6.25. So now it makes you think, even though I projected him to be an edge rusher, I think he has a very high edge rusher ceiling. That's really interesting. It makes you think maybe he is better suited for defensive tackle. That's where he started. He was at defensive tackle at first and then moved to edge rusher more recently, but he was so great at edge rusher. I mean, even ignoring this data, I love the RAS scores. Again, shouts out to Kent and everything, but just film study wise, I still feel like edge rusher is where his highest ceiling is potentially at. But that's really interesting that his athleticism score was way lower as an edge rusher than defensive tackle. Also, Chop Robinson, shouts out to him for having a great day yesterday, but it's like two sides of it, because on one end, 4.49 40-yard dash, the best 40-yard time out of any edge rusher is amazing. His 1.54 second 10-yard split was also first among edge rushers. That's amazing. And then his 10-8 broad jump was tied for first amongst edge rushers. Like, he killed the combine, but at the same time, his 32.5-inch arms with 9 1/8 inch hands did surprise people a little bit in a bad way, where it's like, I don't know, man, that length. But when, I mean, he was measured for that length before he had those testing results. I'm pretty sure those testing results, if anything, outweighed his lack of length, and if anything, he's netted positive as far as his draft stock improving, I would assume. And continuing with the edge rushers, Walter Football went on to say, outside of the top 10, there could be a lot of playoff teams that are looking to add edge rusher help. And he specifically named the Rams, Dolphins, Eagles, Texans, Buccaneers, Cardinals, Lions, Ravens, and 49ers could all be in the market for an edge rusher. The 49ers, I know they have Nick Bosa, but Chase Young is leaving in free agency after they traded my Commanders their compensatory third-round pick to give them like a 1 year, well, like a 80% of 1 season trial run, and they may not bring them back. Who knows? We'll see. Thus, teams picking in the teens and 20s are potentially in good position to move down if another team wants to move up for Latu or burst. So if you're a team that you're looking like, hey man, there's several guys I'd be willing to take with this pick. If I can get a lot of value to trade back so one of these playoff teams can move up to get an edge rusher, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of takers for that. There's going to be some teams in that little middle section that don't necessarily need edge rusher. They want to add on to the draft picks that they already have and try to build and bring in as many guys through this draft as possible. I can see that happening. I'm definitely seeing some trade movement, some draft movement when the draft comes around. I'm excited, man. Also, really interesting, apparently Bill Belichick loved Jayden Daniels. He was a guy that was on the top of their draft board. He was going to do everything within his power to get him. That was reported straight up to the NFL Network for everybody to see during combine coverage and everything from NFL insiders, all of that. So now it takes you to the idea, does Gerard Mayo, the current new Patriots head coach, does he feel the same way? Is he going to stick to that plan? That's a very interesting thought to throw out there. Also, there's a report from Mike Chiari of Bleacher Report saying that the Patriots are heavily leaning towards quarterback with the number 3 overall pick, and they explored free agency options, but they're more so thinking they're probably just going to take whoever they like most that's available at number 3 overall, and maybe they're even going to be willing to trade up if they have to get the guy that they really want. But again, there's been rumors out there that the Patriots may be willing to trade back, like, we don't really care about quarterback that much. Maybe we can get one in free agency. We can give Mac Jones another try. No, it sounds like they're more so leaning towards quarterback, if anything. And so now the question is, do they like Drake May more than Jayden Daniels? Because we've been hearing Drake May attached to the Patriots for the past couple of months, like as the better fit and things like that. But Bill Belichick was in love with Jayden Daniels and probably even had him as his quarterback 1. Does Gerard Mayo follow Bill Belichick's footsteps, or are these Patriots rumors from the last couple of months holding true? It's going to be really interesting. Of course, it depends on what the Bears do at number 1, which I'm pretty sure they're going to take Caleb Williams. Then the draft actually starts with the Washington Commanders at number 2 overall, whether they take Jayden Daniels or Drake May. And I'm sure the Patriots will be happy with whoever is remaining there to end up taking that guy. I personally, if I were the Patriots, I wouldn't trade back. Whoever the Commanders don't take, I would happily take, because as a Commanders fans, I prefer Jayden Daniels over Drake May, but hey man, I'd be really happy to have Drake May as well. I think all 3 of those quarterbacks are going to end up being really good. Now, odds are that won't happen. That very rarely happens, but I think all 3 of those guys are really good. But sources with New England told WalterFootball.com that they feel that all 3 quarterbacks are worthy of being top 3 picks. So to go back to my point, those sources have Williams at the top, Daniels 2nd, and May 3rd. So there you go. That ranking order, however, could change after events like including the Combine, Pro Days, and pre-draft visits take place. So really interesting right there. So from Walter Football's point of view, from what he's hearing behind the scenes and things like that, apparently Drake May is number 2. But if the Commanders just so happen to take him 2nd overall, apparently they like all 3 top quarterbacks and will be willing to take whoever the Commanders don't take, even if it is Jayden Daniels, even if they prefer Drake May. Also, speaking of Drake May, there was a report back on February 23rd that the Falcons wanted to trade up for a quarterback in the draft, with Drake May being one of the quarterbacks that they're interested in. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they prefer Drake May over everybody else. They just mentioned, for some reason in that leak, that report, that rumor, whatever you want to call it, that Drake May is one of them at the very least. Going back to Walter Football, apparently teams are projecting Jatavion Sanders to be a day 2 pick, more than likely round 2. I would guess over like round 3. If I had to put money in either one, if I had to pick round 2 or round 3, and I had to put all of my chips in one section, I would put it in round 2. But I think there is a slight chance that he could end up going round 3. I just think round 2 makes a lot more sense because I love his talent. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if the Commanders took him with our second round pick, the one that we traded Montez Sweat to the Bears for. But Walter Football goes on to say Georgia's Brock Bowers is the consensus top tight end prospect for the 2024 NFL Draft, and he is safely set for the top half of round 1. And there were reports that Brock Bowers, I think he even said it in his combine. As a Georgia Bulldog fan, I feel like I failed the Georgia Bulldogs because I have not taken the time and had the chance and the time to watch all of my dogs press conferences and interviews so far from the combine, but I believe I saw somewhere that Brock Bowers said that he has already met with Jim Harbaugh, so I would be surprised that if he makes it past the Chargers. But either way, he's more than likely going to go top 5 for round 1, so we're good there. But then there's going to be this big gap of Brock Bowers taken and then the next tight end taken not happening until maybe round 2, maybe even round 3. Going back to Walter Football, Sanders is very likely to be the next tight end taken in the 2024 NFL draft, but I wouldn't necessarily bet all of my coins on that, but I would assume that he's probably going to be the next one taken. And many teams are looking for a mismatch receiving option at the position. However, in speaking to sources at multiple teams, none of them had a first round grade on Sanders. Not even like very few, none. Quote, no, he's not a first rounder for us, unquote, said an AFC area scout. Quote, but this is a weaker tight end class at the top, so he could go higher than he should, unquote. So basically, maybe he does end up going late in the first round just simply because it's not a really good tight end class and somebody has to go. I mean, after Brock Bowers, there's teams that need tight ends, and somebody may reach for one just simply because the supply is so low. The demand is higher than the supply right now, which does kind of suck for teams that need tight end, including us, because I'm hoping that Ja'Tavion Sanders is hopefully even available with our early 3rd round pick, but I highly doubt it for the reasons that Walter Football already explained, the AFC scout explained. Now moving on, the Justin Fields to the Falcons odds just increased literally every few hours. I mean, it went from opening at plus 350. Now it's currently at negative 250. I'm pretty sure by the time I release this video and a lot of y'all watch it, it's probably going to be even higher than that. It just keeps going up and up and up, and it just seems like it's a sure thing that's going to happen. And then, of course, there's that video that was released of Justin Fields being excited, and somebody said in the background, are you ready to go home? But then people were saying that he was more so talking about something completely different, where he was imitating special teams players, something like that. I don't know. It was a really interesting video. This is why we're covering this in rumors. If we were just doing purely trustworthy sources and reports, I wouldn't have brought that up. But, you know, I'm just trying to throw out all of the information out there that I have, whether it's fake or not. Also, there's a report coming from Walter Football that the Bears are thinking either edge rusher, wide receiver, or tackle at number 9. Remember, they have 2 top 9 picks in the draft, number 1 and number 9, which is absolutely crazy, man. Shouts out to the Bears. They can go get Caleb Williams and still go get an elite player after that. Walter Football said that the Bears have in mind to target an edge rusher or wide receiver with the 9th pick. Those are the primary targets, but an offensive tackle is also an option if they fall in love with the player. So maybe like a Joe O or Olu Fashanu if they make it that far. Doubt it. Maybe they just fall in love with a J.C. Latham or Troy Fatanu or something like that. Maybe they take one of those guys that high. I doubt it. I feel like it makes a lot more sense. You could argue the best position in this draft is wide receiver. If you need wide receiver, you take a wide receiver at 9. You don't even look back. But of course, with positional value, you could argue the edge rusher would make more sense. So if you want edge rusher, there's Dallas Turner potentially is going to be there. And I feel like that would arguably be a steal at number 9. I can't believe how underrated Dallas Turner has been in this draft process. Maybe I'm missing something. Even as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm like, I don't know why people aren't talking about him at the very least similarly in the same light, at least in the same stratosphere as a Will Anderson. I mean, I'm not even hearing anything close to what Will Anderson was getting last year. I'm amazed. Also, there's a report that the Giants would seriously consider trading up in the draft if the right situation presents itself. Giants could be eyeing one of these top quarterbacks. That came from JPA Football. Just to let you know, I'm bouncing all around with these reports. Some of these are Walter Football, some of these are from direct sources, some of these are from JPA Football, some of these from Adam Schefter, Benjamin Albright. We're all over the place. So I'm trying to remember to give people credit as I'm going, but you know, I just love talking football, so I'm just ready to move on to the next topic, dive into it and things like that. But that's really interesting though. Because are the Giants potentially trying to find a replacement for Daniel Jones, a guy that they can maybe sit behind Daniel Jones for next year, and then that guy can start in 2025 and be ready to go? Remember, a lot of great quarterbacks right now have sat a year or two. Pat Mahomes didn't start his first game until the last game of the season for the Chiefs' his rookie season because they already solidified their playoff spot. So they were like, Alex Smith, you might as well rest. There's no point of potentially throwing you out there to get hurt. So they let Pat Mahomes start that game, and then the rest was history, basically. Then you have Jordan Love out here looking like a god again. The Green Bay Packers just can't seem to even know what it's like to not have a franchise quarterback. Of course, he sat a couple of years behind Aaron Rodgers, getting a couple of starts here and there with Aaron Rodgers injuries and things like that. But I could see the Giants potentially getting a guy. I mean, even if they don't trade up, maybe they just stay exactly where they're at, and then they just take like if they fall in love with a JJ McCarthy, and then maybe develop him behind Daniel Jones. Even though I don't want the Commanders to get anywhere near JJ McCarthy, I do feel like he has some underrated traits. Like, he's more toolsy than a lot of people expect. Like, he has a little bit more arm strength and mobility than a lot of people, I believe, is going to give him credit for. I think he's going to test better than people expect at the combine. So I can see the Giants, especially after him potentially testing better than people expect at the combine, to take him higher than most people expect. But then again, we've been hearing all of these rumors the past couple of weeks about JJ McCarthy probably even being one of the 3 best quarterbacks in this draft, and he needs to go top 5, top 6. It's been some crazy stuff. I don't like JJ McCarthy anywhere near like that, but if the Giants are interested in quarterback, unless they find a way to trade up, but they just really want quarterback, they're just gonna have to settle for a JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., maybe a Spencer Rattler. Maybe you bet on the highest ceiling out of the second tier, third tier quarterbacks. Really interesting though. Also, my dog Peyton Wilson killed the combine as expected. My dog ran a 4.43. I've been telling y'all, when I do my Commanders mock drafts, I've mocked him to us like 4 times, dating all the way back to like November or December, I believe was the first time I mocked him. He's been on my radar since. As a Georgia Bulldog fan, Glenn Schumann tried so hard to get him to come to Georgia, and then he just decided to go to NC State. And one thing I can trust about Georgia, maybe they miss on the player, but they rarely miss on the evaluation. I knew by how hard Glenn Schumann was after Peyton Willis and how much he was recruiting him, that, hey man, maybe I should keep my eye on this guy. Maybe he has some untapped potential, some raw natural talent that just needs to be coached up and tapped into. And he was excellent for NC State. The only reason that he will even possibly make it out of the first round is just simply because of his injury history. That's it, man. And he's still fairly raw in certain areas, but I would love to have Peyton Wilson on my Commanders. I just doubt it's going to happen because we're going to spend our first round pick on quarterback, more than likely Jayden Daniels or Drake May. Then our first second round pick, more than likely tackle. I mean, unless we address tackle in free agency, we probably need tackle so bad that we'll take both of our seconds, or maybe a second and a third, to trade back up into the first to maybe get like a Troy Fatanu or something like that. You never know. So we won't even have a chance to really even try to get Peyton Wilson to maybe at soonest our second round pick, or maybe even our first, third, who knows. And I just don't think he's gonna be there. So I'm already emotionally detached from one of my favorite players in the draft. I've been saying it for weeks, for a couple of months now. I wouldn't necessarily say that Peyton Wilson is the best linebacker in this class. I can see why some people prefer Jeremiah Trotter, some of those other guys out there, both of the Clemson linebackers, whatever. Or you have the Michigan linebacker, his name is slipping me right now. You have a few guys out there. But Peyton Wilson was easily, as I've been watching tape, my favorite linebacker to watch. Between him and Edgerrin Cooper, they're just freakish athleticism. Those were my favorite 2 to watch in this draft class. Jeremiah Trotter's good, but And I'm not going to say that he's not going to be great at the NFL level, but who I preferred to watch, who just really popped and flashed on the screen the most, who had the brightest flashes, Peyton Wilson, #1 for me, and Edgerrin Cooper, #2. Those aren't my linebacker rankings myself. Those are just the guys that I preferred to watch. And so a lot of guys killed it. I mean, you had Kalen DeLauch from Florida State ran a 4.47. Edgerrin Cooper, my guy, Texas A&M, ran a 4.51. Tevin Wallace from Kentucky ran a 4.51. And then Jordan McGee from Temple ran a 4.55. The linebackers showed out, man. A lot of people consider this linebacker class not very top heavy. Like, there's no just elite guys that you certainly take in the first round. We don't have like a Roquan Smith coming out or something like that, or like a Tremaine Edmonds necessarily that's like a certified first round guy. But there is a lot of quality linebackers that are going to potentially be available in the second and third rounds. So that may be a sweet spot, especially for my Commanders, to probably grab grab one. And then going back to Edgerrin Cooper, man, he had a position best 154 10-yard split, and then he measured with 34-inch arms, man. So shouts out to him. He killed the combine. Peyton Wilson did as well. I'm super excited. I believe I mocked Edgerrin Cooper to the Commanders in one of my mock drafts, and I think all of the other ones except for one I had Peyton Wilson. So I think Peyton Wilson I mocked him to us like 4 times, and Edgerrin Cooper I believe I did it like 1. Also, Braden Fisk had a 4.37 short shuttle. Ridiculous time, because for perspective, shouts out to Dane Brugler for this. Aaron Donald posted a 4.39, so shouts out to Braden Fisk right there. That's some unbelievable agility and twitch right there, some fluidity that, hey man, somebody can tap into that and potentially get an elite player coming out of the college to the NFL level, man. Maybe his best days are ahead of him with a time like that. Really interesting. Also, shouts out to Jeff Howe for reporting that based on combine intel, and in parentheses, still a long way to go, but based on what he's hearing from behind the scenes, talking to scouts and things like that, his early mock draft will be Bears 1st overall, Caleb Williams; Commanders 2nd overall, Drake May; Patriots 3rd overall, Jayden Daniels. And then the Cardinals will be open for business with teams looking to move up to number 4. And I mean, nothing really very interesting there. Of course, as the Commanders, again, I prefer Jayden Daniels slightly, but I would be very happy with Drake May regardless. And we've already talked about the Patriots potentially just wanting to take whoever's available number 3 overall. Between Drake May and Jayden Daniels, they'd be happy with either. But then the Cardinals really interesting, the fact that they'd be willing to move back. But I guess it makes sense, because if 3 quarterbacks go and then the Cardinals are still sitting there, Marvin Harrison Jr., Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt, Malik Nabers, all of these guys are still available. Why not trade back like a couple of spots? And then if you love all of those guys, at least one of them is still going to be there if you trade back to say 7 or 8. So one of those 4, maybe even more guys that you really love and would be ecstatic to get either one, is like you might as well trade back and get more draft value there and still take a guy that you really like. So that makes a lot of sense. It adds up. Also, there's some reports coming from Ryan Fowler, a Commanders reporter, saying that conversations within league sources have reiterated the offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury isn't looking to utilize a quarterback as a major portion of his run game, thus detaching Washington from Daniels, just simply because Jayden Daniels is known as the most mobile quarterback in this draft class. Now, that's really interesting, because if that's true, that's very telling. It sounds like Drake May would be the guy. But at the same time, it is Lion season, so I don't know. I don't know how much to read into that. Apparently, that's what Ryan Fowler is hearing around the league. Then also, Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers on their podcast named the NFL Stock Exchange, they did like a live version. They do videos on YouTube and everything, but this edition, they were live at the Combine for it. And they talked about a lot of different rumors. Most notably, they said that they think that the Commanders are at least going to offer a trade to the Bears for the number 1 pick overall so that they can get Caleb Williams, and that they probably do prefer Caleb Williams above all the other quarterbacks. It's just about whether or not the Bears are going to ask for a ransom in return type of price thing. And then also, they said that it's pretty obvious that Russell Wilson is going elsewhere, and that Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos are definitely going quarterback in the 1st round, but mostly because they just don't have the right draft capital. They'll probably just wait where they are 12 overall and take whichever quarterback they like the most left at that point. And I think after the first 3 quarterbacks, there's going to be a run on so many elite players. Again, Brock Bowers is an elite tight end. I would argue, Georgia bias aside, the best tight end ever in college history. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, and Rome Odunze are crazy. Joe Olu Fashanu, and I would even throw Amarius Mims in there just for simply having the highest ceiling. Wait till this combine. You'll see what I'm talking about. And if you go check the Ohio State tape, you can argue Amarius Mims versus Ohio State last year, like the 2022 playoff, well, 2022 season. It happened in 2023 playoffs when Georgia beat Ohio State because of that missed field goal. You could argue that was the best single game that any tackle in this draft class had. He's had injuries, he's been inconsistent, but if we're talking about who put on the best just singular game, you could argue that. So Amarius Mims I may throw in there as well. There's so much elite talent. Edge rushers, again, you have Latu, Verse, Turner. I mean, there's so much elite talent there that the Broncos may luck up and end up getting their preferred quarterback at 12, outside of the top 3 guys, of course, but between J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., Spencer Rattler, and all of those guys. Maybe all 4 of those guys will be available at 12. I'm actually pretty sure I'd be willing to bet money that all 4 of those guys will be available. More so just because I think it's 2 things. First of all, I just don't feel like either of those guys are worthy of going top 12, even if they are available for the Broncos right there. But they need quarterback supply and demand. It is what it is. And then at the same time, like I've already mentioned, I just feel like there's so much elite talent outside of quarterback that there's going to be a run on everything but quarterback until you potentially get to the Denver Broncos. And then Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers had more rumors as well, a lot more rumors that they discussed in like an over hour-long video, but I don't want to just steal all of their information. Just like Walter Football had a lot more rumors and a lot more information, but I just didn't want to steal all of their content and just completely just take everything they worked hard on and make my own video about it. So make sure y'all go check all of those different people out, Walter Football, the NFL Stock Exchange on YouTube, and all of those other sources that I mentioned. I just wanted to take some of the ones that caught my attention the most, but I'm not about to sit here and just word for word steal all of their information, rumors, and reports that they worked hard for. Those guys went to the combine to get this information. What do I look like just completely coming out here and copy and pasting their information like that? Also, shouts out to NFL Draft Files for this one. There's rumors that Texas running back Jonathan Brooks and the Cowboys are strongly linked. Oh, this is actually coming from Brett Coleman. So NFL Draft Files is shouting out Brett Coleman for reporting this. And I still got to get to Brett Coleman's videos. He's been doing a lot of excellent breakdowns. I saw my guy, A.D. Mitchell. I know he's technically coming from Texas, but that's my Georgia Bulldog. He talked about how he's a top 5 wide receiver in the draft, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going in the first round. He said, beware, if he ends up on the Chiefs, it's over. They're basically going right back to the Super Bowl. The league is done. Well, he used the F word, but he basically said that about my boy A.D. Mitchell. That's the only video I've gotten a chance to watch. I gotta watch all the rest of his, so shouts out to Brett Coleman. But he said Dallas's team doctor did Brooks' surgery following his torn ACL, and the Cowboys have better information than anyone else regarding the status of his injury, and they trust his data and his medicals the most. Dallas is in desperate need of a running back, and Brooks is the type of every down guy teams look for, which take me to the point that it looks like Tony Pollard is probably going to walk in free agency. I saw a report that the Giants more than likely won't franchise tag Saquon Barkley. The Raiders more than likely won't franchise tag my boy Josh Jacobs. There's a lot of players out here getting franchise tagged, but it's not the running backs, and that includes Tony Pollard. It looks like he may be walking from the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know where he's going to land yet, but it sounds like he will not be staying with the Cowboys. They're in cap space hell right now. They got to figure out how they're going to pay Dak Prescott all that money. They got to start to worry about Micah Parsons and Trevon Diggs and all of those guys. CeeDee Lamb as well. So, boy, they got their money tied up. Sounds like they're going to be forced to let Tony Pollard walk, but they really love Texas running back Jonathan Brooks. And honestly, without the injury, I mean, some people are projecting him to potentially go round 3, and I feel like that's just purely injury. And also, Bijan Robinson outshining him last year. All of those great running backs that Texas had, he was kind of got lost in the spotlight behind. He was in the shadow of Bijan Robinson and those guys, but he's very talented, and that could arguably be a steal in the 3rd round, especially if the Dallas Cowboys are confident in the fact that his injury won't be too bad. And then lastly, I got to end this with, what are y'all doing, man? I'm seeing a report from Walter Football that teams don't see Ladd McConkey as a 1st-round pick. What are y'all doing? We're not even going to sit here and read that breakdown and talk about why and who's saying this. Get it together, NFL. Watch when Ladd McConkey, I saw like on Prize Picks, his over and under for his 40 time was like a 4.54. All right, now, when he runs a sub 4.4, like something 4.3s, that's quite likely to happen, or at worst, low 4.4s. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised at all. A lot of people keep talking about how he's like the perfect Patriots wide receiver, like the Wes Welker and all of those type of guys. He's not that at all, y'all. He's closer to like an Antonio Brown as far as athleticism and build and everything. His only problem is staying healthy. I'm not calling him the next Antonio Brown or anything like that, but if we're talking about comps, he's closer to that than like a Wes Welker. This guy is really athletic. I'm tired of the hate, man. I'm tired of the disrespect. As a Georgia Bulldogs fan, I'm putting my foot down here. But at the very worst, they're saying that he's going to go day 2 of the NFL draft, so I'm happy for him. I feel like without the injuries, maybe he would potentially end up going in the 1st round, like late 1st or something like that. But either way, I just hope he goes to a great situation that's going to actually give him opportunities and throw him the ball. I don't want him to go to a team that already has a bunch of really good receivers and then he just gets overlooked and things like that. I think he could easily be a great wide receiver 2 and maybe even work himself up to being a team's wide receiver 1. I truly do. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned to all of the content. Again, I'm coming with like 1 or 2 Commanders videos every day, but I'm also trying to throw in some NFL news and rumors and things like that, especially draft related in the process as well. Working on mock drafts, working on film sessions for a lot of these draft prospects. So even if you're not a Commanders fan, I'm gonna start doing film sessions on a lot of these guys, so stay tuned for that as well. And I really appreciate y'all, man. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.